Hi, I'm Rachel from Empower Your Thoughts, and here with me today via Zoom are co-founders Rebecca and Angela. Joining us today for our Empowered Interview series is Natasha Rose, and we are so excited for this fun and energetic conversation we are about to have. Natasha is a Reiki Master, truth seeker, multidimensional healer, and guide. She is passionate about helping others release energies within the body that no longer serves them through multiple healing modalities. Welcome and thank you for joining us today, Natasha.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So excited.
It's an honor to be here.
So, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what led you to seek out different healing modalities?
Yeah, so my wake up, right, started way back, I think in about like 2012, 2011. And as cliche as it sounds, it started with The Secret. I had never up until that point, been aware that I had the power and ability to create my own reality. It had never been taught to me. It didn't come into my container, my vessel. The only thing I was actually ever taught is that I didn't have power and that I shouldn't trust myself and I shouldn't follow my knowings, or that I had no control over what happens to me. And so in that, I had this kind of natural internal struggle that happens when seeds get planted, where my heart was screaming, yes, this message, outside of the fact that at that time it worked for that person, or I mean, for a lot of people, and it worked for those people sharing that message. But there was so much more to learn in order to realize, like, I'm going to bring in $1 million. I'm going to have checks coming to me everywhere. So it really started on from a very materialistic viewpoint. At that point in my life, I'm in my 20s, right? I have a restaurant that's basically failing. And this incredible sequence of events put me in front of Oprah, of all people, who was doing an interview with Sandra Byrne, I think her name is, or something, but Rhonda Byrne, whoever was the producer of that. Rhonda, yeah. And I had this like aha moment, and I was passionate. I'm trying to get away from the word obsessed. It lit me with such a fire that and at that time I had absolutely no idea where it was going to lead. And it started out again from a very materialistic viewpoint. I just wanted to have all the things, and I wanted to have them easily and with intention, and I could do this, and it's all about the process. And it kind of just segued from that, and prior to that point, obviously, unbeknownst to me, consciously, there's all this hurt, all this trauma, all of this probably negative energy, in the sense of just the vibration that it held from my life, that's balled up inside of me. I get this little peak of hope, and I start reaching outward from a materialistic point of view to try to fix everything. I'm going to fix everything around me, and I'm going to do it with my thoughts because I have control. I'm very much about control at this time of my life. And, one thing leads to another, and The Secret leads to Louise Hay, who leads to Wayne Dyer, who then goes to, then at some point I go and I visit, her name is Jima. I'm sure I haven't seen her for years, but I go to Jima's house in the sequence of all this, and she pulls this card and she tells me about this rose quartz. And from there, I have within a few years, I have what I called a quarter century life crisis, where I basically just walked away from everything, a sequence of events. I closed my business. I go and I'm working as a marketing sales director for this large resort, but nothing is fulfilling. Nothing means anything anymore. And so it literally all had to be stripped and taken away from me. And from that point was kind of my own, where coming into the world, it was everyone else's responsibility to teach me who and what I was. And I had no other knowing other than what they were telling me who and what I was. And then from this point at 25, it becomes my responsibility. Only I got a lot of damage. I got a lot of baggage. I got a lot of fear, a lot of hopelessness, a lot of sadness. And over the last 10 years, I've just navigated through that. And the only knowing is that throughout it all was that I was here to be of service and I was here to help others. And it was somewhere in that path of that last 10-year stretch. And it didn't take long where I was like, I'm going to heal myself. And then I'm going to show others how to do it too. And I became and I was still trying to hold on so tight between that 25 and 30. Like, I know I'm supposed to do this and this is what I'm supposed to do. And you have the internet, like how many businesses I've created around healing and educating and understanding of what I knew at that time, only to again, basically just surrender to a flow at some point, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and not make it my focus, not reach outward any longer, but come into this solace space and realize how powerful my intention is, how important my all of those elements that I had ignored, right? That original container was still within me, despite how much spiritual or metaphysical or despite everything I reached for. And it wasn't until I was able to crack open that container, which I had been avoiding because I knew it was going to hurt really bad. I knew it was going to feel really bad. It wasn't until I started working through those pieces that I realized that here is the magnetism that original seed had planted. I finally understand that vibration was still in me, so I can only call in what that is radiating, that original container within me, even though the other half of me is what my soul self was trying to, it was like this give and take. And now healing those pieces slowly, and then coming into myself, coming into my knowing. Am I healed completely? No, I don't believe that we ever probably are. And there's going to be other things that come down the line, but stepping into where I am now and being able to hold this conversation with you, this is a testament. This is 12, 13 years in the making. I wouldn't have been able to do this even a year ago if it hadn't been for my own dedication to myself to become one and whole with myself. And now in that place, along this path, I've been able to pick up all these tools, all these insights, all these trainings, because I needed them, but now I'm able to share them, and I'm able to share them from a place that is safe and supportive to whoever that is coming to me. And whether it's through communication and just telling stories and having these conversations, or it's actually within my own, I call it my own private practice, the healing practice that I offer to individuals one-on-one.
Amazing.
I find that is so interesting, Natasha, because when I look back on my journey too, there was a time where The Secret, it was very materialistic for a lot of people, but it opened it up, and it wasn't just like me, because we went through that. We lost everything. We were like, during the mortgage, we were mortgage, brokers making lots of money, and then we lost everything, and you had to rebuild. And it's almost, if you look at humanity or society, it's like this wave that kind of affected everybody. And I find too, do you find that like, as you're going through your healing on yourself, it's not only affecting you, but it's bringing in the community and affecting everybody around you?
Yeah, absolutely. But I know that more now from a place of healing and wholeness than I ever knew it from that place of brokenness and separateness, because it took me a long time to understand the power within community, within support, and just again, like I don't think I was, and this is a really critical factor in it, I think I was 25 before I realized there was a difference between conditional and unconditional love. Mm-hmm. And when we are here vibrating at a frequency of love, and when it is the seed, it was the divine, it is everything from which all things should come from, but you don't understand it, right? There's so much chaos and distortion happening that we ourselves are projecting on our outside, in our outside spaces. I don't know if that answered your question, but that made me think of something else too, is we have to think about a time where, and it's really interesting, here we are sitting we're all quarantined to our homes. We're in the middle of what will probably be one of the most monumental financial crises for our society. And at that time, I had a restaurant in 2008 when there's this is this critical time in our history as we knew it up until 50 days ago. This was the mark in history of where it was the breaking point. But for me, yes, did I close a business? Yes, did these terrible things happen? Yes, did I lose everything materialistically? Yes, but I was still breathing. And to reference the point that at that time in my life, I almost made the choice to not. It was a critical where I had accumulated my life purpose, my life being as a direct representation of what I had. And when I didn't have anything and I wasn't connected to myself and I didn't know my own worth, then what is the point of any of this and why do I want to be here? And then this path that would have happened, I kind of skipped a part, but in that knowing that, and that was something I felt, I just kind of smiled past, because you keep going and you keep that smile on and you keep going. And that's the way I was raised, and it just is what it is, but you do it with a smile and everything's going to be okay. But that's not sustainable. And eventually at some point it breaks or it cracks. And if we're not solid here and we have no support system because we weren't by community, we weren't trained to connect within our community or have a community, because we have people around us, but they're all within their own stories. It's not a healthy community, a soul community. Then we sink into ourselves and our minds start to take over and our hearts aren't allowed that truth. And so either divine intervention happens, or by the grace of God, you read something, somehow the universe reaches out to say, no, you're not done here. This isn't how it works. Get going. And that's where my point is, okay, I have to leave, literally walk away from everything that I have. And I'm going to go live in a trailer for a few months. And from that, again, it's that path that started. And now I'm here and everything was okay. And I didn't die. I didn't do anything wrong. I survived. Did it hurt painfully? Yeah, emotionally, physically. My ego was like blown into pieces. But but that's part of that. You have to break apart. You have to break down, and then you, like, I think of J.K. Rowling, one of my favorite quotes ever when I found that, and her story was pivotal, and so many stories were pivotal in my own success. But she says rock bottom is the foundation for that quote, like rock bottom is the foundation from which I built my life on. Yeah. Or I'm not, I don't think that's verbatim, but that's the general idea. And
that's perfect.
Yeah. And I think we're at this time when these conversations are most pivotal for the ones who have continued to live in that outreaching life and built these lives around in non-sustainable ways, for individuals like you, individuals like me, to be here for them when everything crashes down, to say it's going to be okay and you're going to come out stronger and more connected and more whole and with more purpose. And wouldn't you say that from your experience? I mean, were you happy being mortgage brokers and with what you were doing?
Maybe career driven, and
right.
For me, it was financial stability was very, very important to me. So it was very materialistic and it was very ego based.
Yeah.
And I grew up, I want to say, like in banking and financial, which, is fine, but it's very structured and it's very based on systems that we have that you kind of see are being shaken up right now, just in the corporate world and things like that. But on a personal level, it was very debilitating to like have everything explode, you know. And the thing is I think what it is like you're saying, the secret. We had, I had a vision in my life. We were creating a dream. We were focusing on this image that we had, and we believed in it. And then it all went away. And then you're like, it's almost like you lose trust. But I think I was just listening. I can't remember who was talking about, but they're like, your heart has to break in order for it to become stronger. And I think they mean that that foundation has to be that ego-based, that you're separate, that we're not one, we're all separate.
That we're separate, right?
Yeah, that, you know, and I think, you know, like you're saying, community, you have all these people around you, but they're all in separateness. They're not in, you know, togetherness. And it was a rough ride, but, you know, I wouldn't change it, because you're right. Like there was times when we were like, how are we going to pay our rent or things like that? But we survived. And you realize money.
You're always provided for. And
yes, we were never out on the street.
We always knew, you know, growing up, we grew up together, Angela and Rachel and I, we always reminded each other that even though times were hard, and, you know, your story, Natasha, that was wonderful. First of all, thank you for sharing. Because it took me back, you know, like during that time period where Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer, you know, Louis Hay, all of these amazing people that came out and started speaking for us to start waking up, right? That was part of the journey, a big part of my journey, to wake up and start realizing we have this ability within us. And I think, you know, one thing I know about you, Natasha, is that you do have this higher knowing. Even when things are tough, you always know that you're going to be okay. Even, you know, there might be that human side where there's the struggle and there's those ego voices and stuff, but there's always this higher knowing. And I've always felt that about you, that you have that sense of just this higher knowing, you know, this higher purpose that comes through that says everything's going to be okay. And even when, and we've all been through our struggles, you know, but we just knew that. And I love that. I love having each other to be able to tell one another that things are going to be okay. You know, this too shall pass. You're going to get through this. You're always provided for. Life meets you where you're at.
Absolutely. You'd mentioned support system, and it made me curious. Did you have many mentors or people that you were raised with? It almost sounds like you're kind of solo in your journey, and you're kind of out there discovering all of this for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was, they loved me too much for me to be the black sheep, but in regards to the passion, and I think I probably purchased, I bet you it was close to 30 DVDs of The Secret and handed them to everyone I could get my hands on. The book, I would buy the book, I would wrap it up, I would say, you need this, right? Because you need this in your life, you need to understand. And they would like, okay, honey, we love you, okay, all right, you know. But I do have an incredible family unit that is, it's bonded, but it's bonded in, there's no buts. It's incredible family unit. There is a genuine love there, but also there is scarcity. There's still so much lack, so much fear mentality that is wound deep within it, that when you come out as yourself fully, right, that person you weren't allowed to be within that space previously, then again, it's those words like too much, too loud, too intense, like I'm safe here, this is safe, this is all I know, and I don't really want you to come in and change me. And it's not that, and there was a time in my life I didn't understand, right? I was like, come on, like, why don't you want this as bad as I want this for you? You know, why don't you want this as bad as I want it for myself? Here's the light, here it is. But then there became this awareness as that process, you know, this process kind of integrates and you understand. And where this came in too, that version I just referenced before was from a place of isolation of me. That's all I knew was me reading all the books, doing all the things trying to understand, why can't I meditate? Why can't my mind get quiet? Why is there this chatter? What is this chatter? Me going to practitioners, and I would choose, I mean, I was consciously aware that there were, you know, serious traumatic events that took place where I needed professional support, but I searched out individuals with the non-traditional, that had that schooling and that education and that knowing, but also they were open and integrated within the non-traditional forms of healing and healing practices, and the power of you know, different modalities that have been practiced for years in part as part of individual healing. So again, though, I didn't start doing that until I was probably 28, 29. And it took a little time for me to heal, because I'm not sure if anybody's ever ghosted anyone before, but I'll tell you, the most people that I have ghosted is a therapist that gets too close to what hurts. And then I just don't show up. You know, you run, because, and it's not conscious. And at that time, I probably wasn't ready for the healing that needed to happen, or I needed something in, it wasn't like, I don't want to judge the person that was there. You know, that version of myself, I want to have compassion and grace for, because that was part of her process and that's all she knew at that time. But that person that I was, and I tend to talk about myself in multiple versions, because I am a transition. I am always the same one. I have always been, but it has been a matter of putting the pieces back together to come fully to you as myself, because different people, different communities in my life have gotten different versions of me, because that was what was safe. I was trained, I conformed to a chameleon to blend and move with the, to be aware, to observe what was going on, so that I could do everything in my power to keep from being hurt. Because to be hurt as an empath and a highly sensitive person is devastating if you don't have the tools to navigate it. Right. And so that was me for so far. Most of my life was just trying to stay safe. There was this inner container that hadn't been sealed, and it wasn't that it was trying to do me more harm. It was that it was trying to protect me from being hurt, because God forbid you say what you're actually feeling and knowing, and someone comes at you. There was nothing that put me into a hole faster. At one point, one time this happened probably about 4 years ago, and I completely, I deleted my Facebook page, I deleted all my social media, I closed up my computer, and I didn't touch it. And it took me almost a year to come back to it. But when we have these inner knowings and that seed that Rebecca mentioned so far, for me, this intuitive self is so loud that's how I can't deny this is what I am meant to do, because everything that I experience is exactly as I was meant to experience it, so that I could come forward genuinely and authentically in sharing how important that path was in the polarity and the duality of it for where I will take it moving forward. And this is a point in the map, and there's still much to do, but I can't stay quiet. I can't not share, because it's time. Like, now is the time. I can't do this for another 10 years. Sure, I could do this for another 10 years, but who's it going to serve? It serves no one. And when my original knowing, even when I was broken, quote unquote, or trying to put myself back together, my knowing was that I'm here to be of service to the community, to others. And in doing that, and there's an innate, what I was born with is being able to listen. And I did it without even knowing, is listening. And I was the 10-year-old who I only hung around people. My community was individuals that were 10 years older than me. They would keep me around because I was always mature, and I was trying to be older, and I was observing. And then I'm very analytical in my mind. So basically my survival was based on how I was able to process the community around me, navigate the pros and cons, what you don't do, what you do, what's safe, and then present it through myself in whatever capacity was called. And in those are little nuggets of that 25-year-old coming to the 10-year-old and crying because of a relationship or a woe. And somehow I had this effect of being able to ease it and talk through it to where then they could then process, you know, in that capacity of, you know, a 10-year-old and a 25-year-old, but ease it and create awareness around what was actually happening, so then it could be released and move on. And I believe part of that's energetic. And I mean, most of that part is energetic, and that's who is coming through now in my sessions, both in my healing sessions, but also the guided conversations and support that I give others on a daily basis. It isn't something I can contain. And for a long time, it's like, I'm sorry, this is going to sound blah, 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 but I can't even apologize anymore because it's coming through me. And it's, even though it's uncomfortable and it might not be what they want to hear, by the end, it is just about awareness and a reframing of what is, if you're going to put it to me, I'm going to put it back to you. And I'm going to show you how, I'm going to try to show you through words what is coming at me, what is coming through you that you can't see for yourself, in the most loving, gentle way that I can, or how I'm called to.
That's you being true to yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to. If you have this deep knowing and it ignites this fire within you, and you stifle that, you're not doing yourself any good. And it will cause, and for a lot of people out there that don't share their truth or their knowing or their understanding of something, when they're that passionate about it, it creates all kinds of disease within their body. It shuts them down, and it's so sad to see. And so I thank you personally for feeling this fire and bringing it forward. I know we're all very thankful that you are passionate about this and that you want to talk. When you're talking, I'm just like, yes.
Yes.
It's incredible.
It is.
Yeah, and I want to speak to what you just said too, because part of that is, so in my experience, so one-on-one healing sessions can be energy draining, and it's not that it's just holding more space, and it's a very physical aspect of the healing work I do. But I want to go back to that space when I am sharing, and that fire is coming out and it is flowing, and there are very few hiccups in that communication. That is lighting me up. That is amping me. That is giving me energy. And I come out of it, whether that person was crying and sobbing and they're grateful, they're honored, they're just, they're happy. There's a shift, because I'm not going to just leave them hanging and say, da, 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 and then, walk away. I'm there to support them in a loving way. This fuels me. This makes me want to go run around the block. Like, I'm so fired up with energy and passion. That is how we are meant to be. If
Yes.
we are not living with but we don't know this because we were taught that, it goes back to that materialistic. I didn't come out of the womb knowing that I needed to have all these things in order to be happy, or thinking I needed to have all these things to be happy. I was taught that. That is our culture. That is our society. So when you have the ability to go far enough in, because I'm a huge advocate, and one of the things that I will seriously, I don't see myself protesting at any point in time, because I choose to use my energy in other ways to make impactful change. But if I stand for anything, is that we have the ability and knowing within each of our own selves to know exactly what we need. There is not one person in the world that can tell us what we need in order to be happy, healthy, and whole human beings. It is within us. It is what is our own knowing. Is it going to tell us exactly what it is? No, maybe not, maybe. But most often than not, it's going to guide us to what we need. But we don't ask our bodies. We don't ask ourselves without thinking. We don't feel into our heart space and our knowings to find the truth that is for us, what we need.
Yeah.
And it is the universe, it is spirit, it is our guides, it is whatever you believe in a divine and higher source. Because at this point, you're not listening to this conversation if you believe that we Big Bang happened or whatever, I would say you probably wouldn't find yourself here, right?
You're probably not still listening if you think source is without.
Right, exactly. So that source sends us, our higher selves send us these little seeds, these little knowings, they drop it in conversations, they drop it in people around us, they drop it in books that we read, and they're activation points that are to get us back to ourselves. Yes. And I am a huge advocate in us coming back into our bodies. And you're like, what do you mean? You're in your body? No, because the majority of us were taught and trained that we could not be who our soul self was as it came in, because our souls were here before us and they'll be here after us. Our body is what does not survive the whole process. We are here to experience within the body. But at some point when we're young, a trauma or an abuse, something happens, and we find that it is no longer safe to be in our body. We find, and it's a broad statement, and I'm just saying it in respect to this conversation that we're having in my own journey. I disassociated, right? It was not safe to be in my body. Most of my memories I remember from seeing up here because my sight, but that also, and I want to segue back to this later of how this is helping me now, but at that early age, it was not safe to be in my body. And so my soul self, I disconnected from myself and began to see the world. And that's where I observed. And I tried, and I always had a plan A, B, and C, because what if this didn't work? Or what if she's going to ask me this, or I couldn't have been able to do an interview like this because I would explain it, that someone would come at me with a question or a statement. If the energy is a certain way, it'd be like if I was walking down a hallway and I had this thing of files and I just tripped and everything goes black because you have an expectation or you're requiring an answer from me that energetically there's more to it than what you're saying, and I wasn't prepared for it. It's literally like having an avatar. Like my body just like, I just can't, right? And to that usually in my experience is tied to, that's where it comes in as a parent or authority figure, or in my experience, men, like, why can't you answer that question? Are you lying? Who are you? And so then there's all these labels and you're just continually being attacked. That's not safe. So I'm not gonna be in there. I'm gonna keep myself out of those situations. And where this comes into play later in life is us being in the roles that we are in let's say in the corporate field, because I very much have, experience the corporate life and moving up where it's comfortable to move up the ladder. But God forbid we go up and someone comes at us with something that we're not prepared to tell them, and then they call us out because we're not who we're saying we are. So I'm just going to stay down here and I'm going to keep myself small and I'm going to do really great in my little bubble that I'm in because it's safe. Like it just radiates. But then, and two, I'm teaching my kids that, go up here, do it, but I'm not getting to the root of where that is. So it's a cycle. So what started over here is now.
Well, it starts when you're young too. I don't know about you, but did you get told? I mean, I know Rachel and her children are to be seen and not heard. Big one when we were young, and I know a lot of people our age now. We're a little older than you, but that was a big one. Children are to be seen and not heard. And my parents would have strangers come up to us when we were out and say, "Oh, your kids are so good. They're so polite." And my dad would say, "They know better." I remember that, so that kind of goes back to, it is a cycle, and it is something that we're showing our kids. If we're not speaking our truth and we're not speaking up when we feel powerful and passionate about something, what are we teaching them?
Yeah, and then coming back and realizing and having that awareness where that dad figure is projecting in your life right now. Who is he coming through? Because the person in your life, it's not about what the face looks like. It's not about the body frame. It's the energy. When that energy matches another energy that's coming at you, your soul self, your vibration doesn't know the difference, right? So you are triggered. Trigger would be a word here. And this person might be on a completely different thought path or going to say something else, but the energy they're holding is exactly what that father figure did to you. You know, you were to be seen and not heard, and it is impacting you on a cellular level and basically continues to debilitate as an adult. And we don't even realize it's happening because nobody's talking about this.
Yeah.
There are people who are talking about it, but it's really thick inside a very big book, and there's a lot of language that's hard to wrap your head around. And so my hope too, like what I want to bring to the table is invite people who have an understanding of how this works to articulate it in a way that is warm and welcoming and clear, to allow awareness for individuals to wake up within their own stories. That is living in a vibration. You're consistently reliving that story. So it only affects our children if we allow it to affect ourselves.
Right. Absolutely.
I don't want to enable people. I want to educate them so they can quit returning to those traumatic spaces and reliving those events by just being aware of what's actually happening. I want to help guide them to the individuals who are trained to support them on a full, not just on a cellular level, but on an emotional level, to process those triggers and those spaces within their bodies that are projecting, and they're inevitably reliving over and over.
I think that one thing is, a lot of people, at least I know with my own experience, I have a lot of experiences. I have a lot of missing memory from my childhood. And so I really, and I know through some of the work I've done to heal some of that, I don't have a lot of memories because I suppressed them. It was too uncomfortable. It was too uncomfortable, but then I knew something was wrong. And so I knew I had to do the work to start digging into that. But I can't remember who it was. It might have been a therapist that told me this, that you don't actually even have to relive that memory where that original wound took place. You can actually heal that on an energetic level and not relive it. And so I think that's important for a lot of people who are scared, because sometimes it can be painful to open up old wounds or to relive those damaging experiences that we've had, that they don't have to actually, in order to heal that, you don't necessarily have to go back and relive that moment. You can actually heal it on an energetic level. Would you find that to be true?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it is so critical. And I can literally speak to, I am just now is 35 years old, and just touching on what I was so terrified, that container I was so terrified to open, because I thought I was going to have to feel all the sadness and all the pain and all the fear again in order to move through it. Because everyone talks about just feel your pain. You got to feel it to heal it, which I will say, because there is an element of that. But you never do that without the proper support and foundation first, right? There are safe ways to do it. But there's also our mind, because this 35 years of creating this idea, or probably let's say consciously 15 years of creating this idea of how painful that is going to feel once I open it and get to it, right? So we think about that with anything. What is anxiety? It is a fear of something that might happen or is going to happen, but hasn't happened yet, because our mind has created this, blown it into this big thing, when the reality is that once we find that space which we feel comfortable in navigating those emotions and that pain that's living within our body, or that feeling, or whatever it may be, it's not nearly what we had created it in our mind. And this is, I believe, an epidemic of our society. We use our imaginations and our critical thinking in a way that is actually debilitating, because we're more up here than we are in here. Because if we were to feel in to that event or that fear or that thing that is causing us anxiety and that we just don't know what to do, it's because our mind is in control. So that's where I finally understand the power of why meditation is so critical. I'm not going to say I can't. I don't prefer traditional meditation. I don't wake up and meditate every day. you know, but what I do love doing, but I don't have to. I could be painting. I could put my feet out on the ground. I find it's relaxing I take a shower. I drive in the car. I love going on drives. That's where most of my insights come in, is just getting in the car and driving out into the forest. Meditation comes in different ways, but the whole point of that meditation where people are like, get to meditation, get out of your head, blah, 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 blah. I never understood it, but it's simple. It's because the whole point behind that is our heads and our minds are creating through these ideas and these feelings and thoughts that were projected from past. It's fight or flight. It's everything that could be. It's this old paradigm, this old cycle that we're continuing to live. And we did that then in order to protect us. But now here we are. We have roofs over our heads. We control our own spaces within our homes. We control the flow and the love and the grace and everything within our lives. So if we can take a minute to find what it is that drops us into our heart, to feel into those spaces of where there would otherwise be anxiety or fear or angst or anger, which are not natural either, by the way. They're not like on the emotional scale. And this is not my medicine or magic or tools. I've read this. I can't quote who talks. There's lots of doctors.
There's lots of science.
There's tons of teachers. There's so much science behind what I'm sharing. And you can go find those facts easily. It's all backed up and it makes perfect sense.
Well, meditation is just to quiet the mind. It's, because when your mind's constantly going, you create neural pathways within the brain, and it's a wrap. So, like you said, being able to take a drive where you're not focusing on one thing, or playing a guitar, or doing music, whatever it is, listening to music where it takes you out of that, the neural pathways in your brain where you're constantly thinking about something that's bringing up anxiety. Because as humans, we're on a hamster wheel. We continue to think the same thoughts. And so meditation is quieting the mind, being able to do something that takes you out of that thought process that's constantly going.
And probably more importantly is just to say, you're just looking to get into a meditative state. So that, because I think that there has been a capitalization on the term yoga, meditation, right? There's this, and it's so unreachable for so many people. My mind, who I am, my being, does not get quiet the same way that the person that can meditate for hours. Could I force myself to train myself to do that? Probably. But it doesn't feel good to me. So why would I do that? Instead, I choose to go for a car ride. Instead, I prefer journeying over meditation. I use my imagination. My imagination is like, that's how spirit, that's how guides, that's how my knowings come to me. They come to me in very clear pictures. They come to me in very clear words and very clear feelings throughout my body to tell me the messages that I need to know. But again, getting back to where that anxiety piece comes in, and I feel like this segues back to the original question, but I might have lost it along the way, is you were talking about how, therapy and feeling those, everything that was, and then I went into talking about how much we think it is going to be worse than it is. And that's the truth. Flat out, we have not been taught to feel into our bodies and go with and really, no, because if we were to get quiet in whatever capacity that was, take a drive, drum, go on a journey, go outside, and we slow our heartbeat down, and we can hear, if you get quiet enough, you know that you're there, because you can actually feel the blood within your fingers. You can feel the beat of your heart within your chest. And you ask yourself, do I need to be worried about this? Is this something that I need to concern? That first answer is your answer. We just haven't been taught to trust it. We haven't been taught to believe what it is that comes from us. We've been taught that we need to get it from out here. And that's the truth. It's always someone else's truth. And not everybody's truth is going to be the same truth. So when we get back to our bodies and into our hearts, and we can answer our own questions, right? I want to guarantee you, as long as you're doing it from a heart-centered place, because too, that those, sometimes we just don't know. We don't know what it feels like to, maybe we can't literally feel our heart in our chests. And it all depends on what scale that someone on this path, or what space that someone on this path is on, to what ability they would have to do that. But I want to guarantee that if you put your hand on your heart and breathe, you can feel your heart pumping. And if you can regulate your body into the beat of that heartbeat, that is your own heartbeat, and you ask the question, the first thing that comes to mind, the first knowing you have, the first vision you see, depending on which sense is more prominent, is going to be your answer.
Yeah.
Love that. That's conversations with God. Yes, that's what he says, you know, if you ask the question and then you allow yourself to be silent and listen, you will give yourself the answer. And it comes in that knowing that we talked about, this knowing that this is right. You feel it. You feel it somewhere within your body. Does it resonate with you? Does it feel right? You know, and that doesn't mean that other people don't have the answers for us. You know, there are lots of people out there that I'm like, they're talking and I'm like, hell yes, that is exactly, but you feel it, right? You align to it. And when you ask the question and you get the answer and then someone else gives you that answer as well, then you know you're on track, then you know. But it's just getting quiet and listening to yourself and knowing that you have the answers within.
Right. Well, and I think so many people condition themselves to not check in. They may not even recognize that at first, that is their higher self talking to them and giving them the answers. So I think that it is kind of a regulated practice that has to go into play in order for you to start recognizing that voice is you. That is your answer and your truth. And stop, because we tend to just kind of numb it out, quiet it out. It's not us. It's, you know, if it doesn't make sense, but they're not listening to their higher self. They're not listening to their true self telling them, oh yes, this is right, even if outside circumstances say otherwise.
Well, and I think that comes to this belief system that we are separate, that, you know, and one of the things that I've been working on lately is connecting with my higher self and talk to my higher self. And it's just as simple as stopping and being like, hi, higher self, you know, what do you, you know, like, and asking your higher self questions just randomly throughout the day, and then just being silent, like Becca was saying. And it is a practice. And I think that we have been taught as a society, like Natasha was saying, to look outside yourself for answers. We are not taught to look within ourselves, because truly we have our own divinity. We have our own sovereign divinity. We are divine beings living on this earth, and we are all connected. And I just went off on a tangent.
I love the tangent because it's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting, and this is kind of, I don't know why this is coming through, but you know, I always used to read books. I was reading this book once, and it was I think it was The Word I Am Word, Paul Selig, and they were talking about witnessing. And he was saying witnessing is not telling somebody else something. Witnessing is you living in your truth and others witness it. You don't tell somebody this is the way you need to think, or this is the truth.
Right.
You embody it. You get one with yourself. You embody it. Then others will take notice and be like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing that's so great? You're so happy, or you're so calm, or you've changed, or you've shifted. That is the really truth of what witnessing is. It's witness. You are embodying your divine sovereignty. You're embodying your true self and stepping into your power that we are all inherently, it's our inheritance. We all as human beings have this, you know? And I think that that's important to realize, that people don't realize that. We're not taught that. We are taught, you know, oh, big one, tell me what to do, instead of being like, yeah, big one, tell me what to do, but I have the answers within myself if I open up to it, you know. It's not out there it's coming in from within, you know.
Yeah.
We're conditioned. We're conditioned from a very young age. And I think that there are those of us who have come through as their purpose and their passion in this life, like Natasha, who that voice is so loud, it cannot be quieted, where the rest of us might be sleepwalking a little bit because we're conditioned to ignore, we're conditioned to ignore our higher calling, our higher messages. And so we need people like Natasha to be messengers and to step outside of the conditioning and the fear response, to quiet that inner voice and say, I don't care. I'm going to speak my truth anyway.
Yep.
Because speaking
Get quieted.
it speaks the truth for everybody.
Yeah.
Even if the other person doesn't like it, or
Yeah.
even if it triggers them, or even if, because you're standing in your own divinity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
there's two things I want to mention though with saying that too. And I speak to this because I am so passionate about that inner healing portion of the work. Because there's a difference between someone speaking their truth from up here of what they think needs to be said, and someone sharing their truth from here, this whole divine space as one unit. And so if we don't have those pieces fully healed, if the up here is going to be projected as anger, they're lower vibrations, right? It's rage, it's mad. I can be mad about something, I could be really, really angry, but if I am passionate about what I believe in, you see it in my face and you know it with certainty that this is not right. I'm going to stand for a person who's being neglected or what is the word I'm looking for, or abused. I'm going to stand for something. Or I'm really scared and I'm just going to look out all over everybody, because then you're just puking your energy all over everyone else. And if it's sucky and sticky to them, and then but
it doesn't feel good. It doesn't.
And knowing how powerful. If you don't have the awareness, you're going to take that as truth, because this person you look up to, there's so much, you have to have that respect for your community too. If you put yourself in a place of a platform to then speak from, you share from your own truth, that heart space, that knowing, because if we have not healed wholly in that, and we're speaking from here and what we think, we are no better than anyone who taught us or told us who and what needed to happen. And also, the second that is very important to know, because there are so many individuals that do not know, that for so long I could not even listen to my voice on a voicemail. I hated hearing my voice on a recording. I did not want to hear myself. Here's your sign, you might have something that needs healed. If, like vibrationally, the voice that I use, it's a shift, it's energy, it's consciousness, right? And so there is an alignment, right? I can sit here and I can talk to you now, and when we're done, I can sit and I can listen now with sovereignty for self. If we don't have sovereignty for ourself in a true rooted way of divine knowing and love and connection, and aren't knowing that we are not separate from anyone, we are all one. I'm a reflection of you and you are a reflection of me. This is why we can come together in this space right now and have this conversation. It is divine and it is sacred, and we have to utilize our platforms from that safe space, from a knowing space, because there are so many who are not awake, and they're going to trust us, and they're going to feel into the message, and sometimes they're going to think, they're not going to feel into the message, they're going to get an idea or a thought, whether it's that trigger that you talked about, it's triggering wounds, it's maybe they don't like the message, maybe they do like the message, but they take it in a completely different way. We have to hold space for that. And also, I feel it's very important on this platform, because we just spoke to how important it is to listen to our knowings, that knowing, that whisper, that quiet whisper that nobody else can hear but you. It is never, ever, ever going to have you do something to yourself or put yourself in a space that is not for your higher good. If you are hearing anything that is negative, angry, heart, it is from your head, it is your thoughts, it is your ideas, it is your belief, it is not your heart. And so back up, rewind. You never take action from here. You take action from here in your knowings. And you seek help if you can't. You find someone to support you. If all you hear is negative, that means there are people in the world and they are safe, because trust me, I know. I remember my mom dragging me. My family is my family line is, I grew up, how did I say this? Since I know certain individuals who are going to watch it. Medication is the answer, right? Medicated individuals, and I'm not putting that down. I'm not at all, but there's a root cause to what's happening. So I was dragged, and I'm just saying that specific line for what I'm going to tell you. I was taken at a young age. I remember this. My first therapist, when my mom dragged me, and I think I was 15, nobody knew outward I was suicidal. I was suicidal from probably 11 to the very last time I ever contemplated suicide. I believe I was 26. And I had a very vivid, it was literally by the grace of all things divine. It was a miracle that occurred in order for it to come out of that. But I struggled with that for over a decade of not feeling enough and no self-worth and that anger. Every word that came through my idea was a thought or belief or understanding of something I had created and amplified of my outside space, okay? So I get drugged to this therapist, right? And I feel energy, I'm an empath, right? So I don't understand it then the way I understand it now, but I can feel the judgment. I can feel it burning off all of his, over his glass, and it's a man, so that probably wasn't the best choice, but over his glasses and on his board. And so by the time I finally came around to my own healing path and knowing that I needed support and I needed assistance, I started searching. And I wasn't aware that I was doing this then, but you know what? even the therapists I ghosted were incredible human beings who were getting me to the work, to the part that I just wasn't ready. And had I stuck around, they would have helped me through that. And these were therapists and clinical. It was a very clinical space that they had been educated within, but they were open to the thought of how does breath work with anxiety? How does meditation tie in? How does yoga tie into this practice? How does EMDR, again, I will mention that until I think is probably the most, one of two. If we were taught clinical, I'll stay with all of that to go back to the original question of EMDR has been the most efficient, transformational, and highly effective element in my healing path that I have ever experienced before. This is
what EMDR is, or what it stands for?
It is. It's very long, and it has to do with rapid eye movement. I think it's destabilization. It's basically, and I can totally put you in contact with a woman that I would pray would have this conversation with you, because I think more women need to know about it and what it can offer. More men and women need to know about it. But it's basically, you feel it desensitizes that memory, which then is the trigger that you are reliving in your life. So through the process of talk therapy, but also reprogramming that element that Rebecca had mentioned and touched on earlier about those waves and how we're conditioned and our synapses and all the things. This is not my medicine. This is just what I've learned second, third hand, the way they move. EMDR,
science, yeah,
it's a science. Then there's so much information out there. But in her traditional outside traditional practice, she uses non-traditional methods along with this very clinical practice of EMDR, which is not well known enough. More people need to talk about it because it is literally changing lives. And you reprogram the pathways that are ultimately triggering those events in your current life from those events that happened back when you were 5 years old, right? And there's a more formal way that this can be described. I'm using it in kind of a fun and witty, because that's how I'm just going to throw it at you. So this in regards to a mental, emotional healing has been the most critical of my path thus far. I am aware of my worthiness. I own what my truth is, and I am supported by individuals who helped me get out of this idea. I was my own worst enemy. I was my biggest shamer. My most judgmental person in my life was me. And
most people dealt
right?
with that.
We are our biggest judges. We have these full conversations in our heads of what everyone on the outside is thinking or doing or going to think about, like this space right here, or what we just typed. And then we're going to go back and we're going to delete it real quick because of that. When really all of what we have to share is that connection, the divine connection that is never broken, right? We might not be aware of it and we might not allow it to connect, but we are always connected divinely together and to our divine source, whatever you want to put, whatever name you want to put on it, or just be with it. And so in that aspect, and going back to the original question, on a clinical or on a mental emotional side, EMDR has been the most transformational part of my process, and it still is. When I am triggered, if I can't work through something myself, which I try because I'm all about, we have the tools, we have the ability, but if something is a little bit heavier, or maybe I'm drawn, maybe I literally see G in the side of my head, and that's my sign that, hey, go get yourself some support, because she's like an ancient grandmother tree who's here for you. You know, it used to be that we were brought into communities and we were raised by communities, and we were raised in an unconditional love. We knew what our role was. We knew what the expectation was, but we were loved for just being as we are. And that we've gone away from that, and we have to go back to that. But first, we have to heal ourselves. And in doing that, we have to create that for ourselves. We have to find that soul family, those individuals that are here. We made pacts before we came that we're going to come back together, and we're going to heal each other so that we can then be giving more. We can then end this cycle and allow our children some sort of a chance to survive what's coming based on their own knowings and inner compasses. We teach them to trust themselves from a place of sacredness and holiness. And all of these words can be like taboo, and what is that, and what is ceremony, and there's so much taboo we've been taught to treat. But it was before the church, it was before religion, it was before you were taught.
Ceremonies are ancient. They've been around forever.
And it was taught before we had to be taught what we are. Before we just came into earth and we were who we were. But that was a really, really, really long time ago.
So
but
going back to that, not to interrupt you, but going back to, knowing this stuff that we know, you mentioned rapid eye movement. Is that something that you have to be taught, or you think that because I thought it was funny when you said that, Madison said that to me earlier, it's what I do. She's like, it's just what you do, Mom. Can you speak a little bit more about rapid eye movement? Because it's something that I've always done. It's something I can't help. When my eyes are closed, I have this rapid. Do you know what is that part of what you're speaking on there?
No, I'm not sure what that is, but I would be really interested to know that.
Well, you said rapid eye movement, and I was like, what is that?
Yeah, and maybe that is a part of, maybe that's deeper, and that's like more of what G is aware of and not what I'm aware of. Maybe I do it, maybe I did it too, and like in that thinking space. My intuition says that's somehow connected to spirit and how we analyze and process information, but that's totally intuitive what I just shared right there. I don't actually know. The EMDR portion has to be done by a
Rachel, what were you saying?
Oh, my intuition says that has something to do with the way we process information from spirit or divine in whatever capacity we're at in that space.
Absolutely. So I know that rapid eye movement can take place when you're in a state of hypnosis. And so I've noticed over the years, because I do meditate frequently, I don't sit quietly and try not to think about anything. I allow whatever to come to me that needs to. I enjoy visualization or creative visualization, but when I was younger and I wasn't meditating all the time, it would take me a long time to get to that place where I would have that rapid eye movement. But I would notice that in my meditation, you get into this theta state. And so when I started getting more into the practice of meditating, I get to that place, Rebecca, really fast. Like I'll sit down, close my eyes, and all of a sudden I've got the rapid eye movement going, and I'm like in that state.
That's what I do as well.
There's a connection there to being in that state where you are done thinking, because the conscious mind that's sitting there saying no, no, no is out of the way, and the subconscious mind has come forward. And that's when you're in hypnosis, is when you start having the rapid eye movement, because it's almost like, I've always thought about it, it's almost like the conscious mind, the thinking mind that wants to be in control all the time is fighting with the subconscious mind to, no, you're supposed to be awake right now. You're supposed to be listening to me. And so it's almost like, it's almost to me like this struggle that's going on between, nope, the subconscious mind is listening and aware right now. You need to take a back seat right now. This thinker needs to take a back seat right now. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what like I said, intuitively, that's what I would say. I had to something I would like, you need to find someone to interview and talk about it. That would be something I would love to watch and understand more of.
Thank you so much for joining us in this 2-part Empowered interview series. Make sure to watch part 2, where we continue this empowered conversation with Natasha Rose. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and sign up for our newsletter at empoweryourthoughts.com.
From all of us here at Empower Your Thoughts,
May you feel empowered.